Welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. This is a great opportunity to introduce you to different people in the congregation, the school, the child care, and even some people who have come to be a part of our ministry recently, which includes our guest for today. I'm really honored and pleased to be able to welcome Chaplain Chad Potts to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. I want to say thank you to you and all of the friends and family I now consider at Shepherd of the Hills. We've been here just a short time and we've already been welcomed in so greatly. So thank you.
Oh, great feedback. Yeah. And I can remember when you guys arrived, it was just a few weeks ago. I believe it was a Saturday night service. Mm-hmm. And I think you had come from taking a family picture together. You guys were in matching polo shirts and were able to greet you and get to know your family a little bit and find out you guys were here for 1 year, stationed in San Antonio with the Air Force.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So could you just tell us a little bit about your situation, what brought you here and what you're doing?
Yep. So I'm active duty Air Force. I have been for about 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. We've actually got 18 years military total between Army enlisted time and a chaplain candidate in the reserves. So we were at Dias Air Force Base, Abilene, Texas, the B-1s and C-130s out there providing ministry. And we're given this opportunity to come to San Antonio for this 1 year. It's called Clinical Pastoral Education, CPE. And so I'm assigned to Fort Sam Houston, actually at BAMC, Brooks Army Medical Center. And I work in the hospital as a resident student chaplain, ministering to patients coming in through trauma and through hospital visits, as well as receiving education, specifically in how to handle pretty intense situations physically. How can we provide a spiritual and a Christian comfort in the midst of trauma?
Right. Okay. So 1 year assignment.
Yep.
And you said you've been in military for 18 years?
Yep.
Right. Now you've been in ministry for how long?
So I would actually consider ministry that whole time as well. So I was, interesting story. I grew up in an unbelieving household. My dad grew up Methodist and fell away from the church, and my mom was kind of hostile to the church, so I didn't have any upbringing in the church at all. But coming into the church, going through adult confirmation in a Lutheran church, I soon felt kind of a calling to be in ministry of sorts. And so when I went into the Army, I was actually planning to be a medic. I wanted to be medical corps, help people, be of service. And I had done well in all the tests and the qualifications to be a medic, except for one test I took. It was the shade blind test or color blind test.
Okay.
I come to find out I can't tell shades. And so out of the 200 jobs I originally qualified for in the Army, because I was shade blind, I can't tell the difference between like red and green on maps and types things. Yeah. They said I could either be a infantry or chaplain assistant. And so I thought, I don't want to be infantry because I know what they have to do. Yeah. And so I became a chaplain assistant. And I think my ministry started there. I was given great opportunities as a chaplain assistant in the Army to just walk the road with folks and kind of be there and journey with them and really learn what it means to be what I call incarnational ministry. Christ just walking with us through some of the tough roads that we've been through. So I don't want to say that whole 18 years has been ministry. Ordained ministry has only been since 2012 after seminary. So
okay. Yeah. Going back, so you said you did not grow up in a Christian family?
No, not at all.
No? So how did you come to faith?
I was chasing after a girl. So there was I lived in a small town. Worked for an auction company that did Saturday auctions, and there was this cute girl that showed up at one of our auctions, and I just started, introducing myself to her, and come to find out she was a camp counselor for a Lutheran Church Missouri City camp in central Wisconsin. Okay. And so we got to know each other, and she kind of led me and shared her faith with me. She ended up going to Concordia Seward after that summer, so she left and we kind of parted ways, but it really kind of brought an interest of faith to me. And so the town that I then lived in, I found the local Lutheran church because that's where she, was part of, and met the pastor there, and he told me about adult confirmation, and so I went through the process of adult confirmation, and that's how I entered the church, so to speak.
Wow, that's great. Fantastic. I want to pause here just for a second. Now, you mentioned that you were an auctioneer at one point. Yeah. Was that your career before military?
It was, yeah. So my parents that was our weekly worship. Our weekend worship was a Saturday auction or a Sunday auction every week.
Yeah.
And so when I was 11, very young, one of the auction companies that we would frequent very often just needed what they called a runner. So a runner is a person who basically takes the item from the sales table to the individuals who purchased that.
Yeah.
And so my dad said, hey, I got it, you volunteered me. And from then on, I became a runner for that summer. And then I got into the auction field. I went to, at the age of 12, went to the Worldwide College of Auctioneering in Mason City, Iowa.
Really?
I was the youngest guy there. Most everybody was, 20, 25 in their whatever age.
Yeah.
I was a very young guy going there and learned some of the tongue twisters and different things to be able to what they call bid calling or auctioneer. And then I became the youngest auctioneer in Wisconsin.
Really?
In the books, yes.
At what age?
Actually, at the age of 12.
At the age of 12?
Yeah, I'm still in the books because now Wisconsin requires you to be licensed as an auctioneer and you have to be 18. So I will forever remain the youngest auctioneer in Wisconsin.
Wow, claim to fame.
Exactly, that's my popularity right there.
How about that? Wow. Now, auctioneer, is that a full-time job?
It really can be. For most folks, it's not. You end up in the auction field doing other things like selling real estate, maybe doing transportation. A lot of times when you do auctions, you'll end up needing to move people's households to different other locations. So we did a little bit of everything.
Okay.
We would do property management, real estate, all that kind of tied into one.
We being you
And the company.
and the company. Okay.
Yep.
And of course, I've got to ask you, can you give us an example of how you would speak as an auctioneer?
I can. So you'd bring an item up to me and I'd say, let's go for sale. Anybody get 35 and $35? I'm at 35 and get 40. I'm at 40 here to get 45. I'm going to get 45 and 50. I'm at 45 higher and 50. Sold at $45.
That's exactly how they sound.
That's kind of what they do.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep. So
Great.
it's kind of fun.
So you could probably take a sermon where it takes me 15 minutes to give it. You could be done in 5 minutes.
I'd say 3.
In 3 minutes. Fantastic.
Yeah.
People might like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thinking a little more about your story that you shared that you started out in the Army.
Mm-hmm.
You're Air Force now.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
So we did 4 years, Army enlisted, and I was stationed actually a great place. We were at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. So we were on the island of Oahu for 3 years.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful, yeah. We did PT, physical training on the beach, and all that fun stuff. But that was right in 2006, 2007 when we were pretty heavy going to Iraq. And so I did a 15-month deployment in Kirkuk, Iraq, which is the northern area of Iraq. We basically covered the Iranian and Turkish borders, tried to stop hostiles from coming into Iraq as we were training the Iraqi police.
Wow.
And I was stationed, so my home base in Kirkuk was Kirkuk Regional Air Base. It was an Air Force base, even though I was Army.
Okay.
And so there was about 5,000 soldiers with me. We were a brigade on that base. And we would travel out to what they call the FOBs, the forward operating bases, and visit our folks. And so we'd go out for a couple of weeks at a time and do our missions and come back. And the Air Force at that time was on 90-day rotations for their deployments. And so it seemed like just about every time I came back, some Air Force group was going home. So I get to call my wife, Michelle, and I'd say, yeah, I just did this mission, and I didn't share a lot of, because we couldn't for sensitivity and stuff. But I'd say, yeah, an Air Force is going home again. And after she heard that several times, she's like, we need to get out of the Army because we can't do this again. Because they offered, obviously, re-enlistments to stay in the Army, and they needed folks to stay in the Army. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I already kind of felt the calling to be a chaplain. I'd worked with a couple of really good chaplains who said, yeah, you need to get your education, go through the chaplain candidate process to become a chaplain. Okay. And so while we're praying through that and thinking through that, she said, yeah, but we can't do Army. You can't do 15-month deployments. At that time, we had 4 boys at home, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And so she's home, 3 of them in diapers, and I'm gone for 15 months. And so as soon as I got home, we began the process to say, hey, how can we go Air Force chaplaincy rather than Army chaplaincy? Yeah. And again, saved by the grace of God, I'd gotten out of the Army active duty, gone to Fort Wayne to seminary and started seminary. Mm-hmm. And that was, as part of the Army process, you have to do at least 6 months with either a Guard or reserve unit following active duty. It's just part of your contract. Okay. And so that National Guard unit in Fort Wayne there was about to deploy again for another 15 months. And I was assigned to them at the time. Now what happens is normally when you're on a deployment, you get what's called dwell time. So you deploy for 15 months, you're supposed to stay at dwell or remain home for another 15 months. But because I had transferred from active duty to National Guard, my dwell time had gone to 0. So they were going to deploy me again within about 2 months after just getting home. And so I thought, we need to do something quick here to make sure I don't deploy again right away. Because I'd get pulled out of seminary, they would deploy me with, no recourse. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Air Force recruiter and said, what can you do? And he said, well, let me make some calls, do some things. Mm-hmm. That was like on a Friday. He spent the weekend doing some research. He called me on Monday. He said, come into the office tomorrow. And so I came into the Air Force recruiter's office, chaplain recruiter, and he's like, if you fill out this forms right now, I can swear you in as an Air Force chaplain candidate, and that'll automatically pull you out of the Army and put you in the Air Force. And I said, please, if you can. Yeah. So he did that for me. And I was so thankful because that weekend was a drill weekend for the Army. They were going to release the orders to deploy. And if you are there at that drill and you receive orders, you can't get out of it. Oh. So by the grace of God, within hours, I was saved from another 15-month deployment.
Wow,
close call. Because it would have been basically gone for over 3 years out of 3 years, So it would have been way too much time away from family. Wow. So I still thank that major who recruited me and got me in. Now, my commander on the Army side was not happy at all. There was a few foul words saying, wait a second, you were filling a slot, and the Army needs those folks. So I felt bad, but I just wasn't going to be capable to deploy again that quick.
Well, as a husband and as a dad, I know your wife, Michelle, was very thankful to have you with 4 little ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she did. She went back to that recruiter, she baked him a cake and thanked him and said, thank you so much for, kind of saving our family for that point. Because it's hard to be away from your family for that long.
Oh, I imagine it is. We certainly, appreciate all the sacrifices that are made by our military
every day.
Being away from family and things of that nature.
Right.
So you had that experience of being away from family, and then you're able to make that change. Now, where was seminary in that timeline?
So it was right there. So it was kind of neat. While I was in Iraq, I was filling out my paperwork for seminary. And if you remember, you had to do your district interview and all those types of things. Well, being in Iraq, how do I get a hold of my district president? How do I, my local pastor, Mitch Gowan, who was at Our Savior in Hawaii, he did all the local stuff, but then I still had to do that district interview. Thankfully, an LCMS chaplain came through on an Air Force deployment to our base.
Oh, wow.
And he did my district interview in Iraq and sent that paperwork forward so that Fort Wayne would then accept me.
Wow.
So I was, if I remember correctly, I think I was accepted to Fort Wayne Seminary right before I came home from Iraq.
I see. So the timing of all that was working out very well.
Yeah, God had it all in control. And I came home, I basically out-processed. Yeah. We kind of knew that, we thought that was going to happen. So Michelle and the boys left Hawaii. They moved to Indiana. I'm expecting us to be able to start seminary right after I got home. So,
a typical seminary program in our denomination is a 4-year program with 1 year as the vicarage or the internship. Was that the kind of program you had?
Pretty close. I did. I had the GI Bill, and so financially I was able to stretch it out. So I did about a 4.5-year program. Okay. I started in November 2007, and did 2 semesters before summer Greek. And then I did the normal 4 years after that. So I was able to take 12 credits every semester. I didn't have to stress out like most of the guys taking 18. I'm guessing you probably took 18, 19, 20 credits every quarter. Yeah. So I felt bad for those guys, but I was like, financially, the military was paying for my education. So I was like, I'm going to take as much time, do as much family time and studying as I could. So it ended up being about a 4.5-year program. But I did do about half a year, the normal 2 years, and then I went on vicarage my 3rd year, and then came back for 4th year in residence. So pretty
Where was vicarage?
So I did Christ Lutheran Church in Leadville, Colorado. Kind of neat. It's one of the tallest cities in the United States. Yeah. It's at 10,200 feet above sea level in the Rocky Mountains. Wow. Neat, small congregation. My supervisor was actually in Breckenridge, Colorado, so he was about 45 minutes away. So I was kind of a solo, which is not always the case with vicars, but it gave me a lot of experience. I got to really do everything and kind of have that full experience. And then I would visit with my supervisor about once a week. I'd drive down, or he'd come up. So I had good mentorship, but just a lot of opportunity to do ministry, which I loved. Yeah. Just kind of getting my feet wet and just kind of doing ministry and finding out, learning mistakes, and going from there. So
sure. So you did that, back to seminary for the 4th year, 4.5.
Right.
And then have you had various chaplaincy assignments since then, or what's been the journey since that point?
Yep, so my first call was at Peace Lutheran Church, which is just about 45 minutes north of Fort Wayne, Indiana. I got an associate position. So another great opportunity with a great mentor. Wayne Burkish was the senior pastor. And so I got to work underneath him for a couple of years as the associate. I was kind of like Lauren with the youth work. I did a lot of youth ministry, a lot of outreach. We did neat projects. We had a foundation that would kind of raise money for us, and we started a community garden in the area. We started just different outreach projects. So that was kind of my ministry there. And then I received a call to back to Christ Lutheran Church in Colorado.
Oh, so,
yep. So I went actually to my supervisor's location though, because he had since left. And so then I served that congregation for about 2.5 years. And then, so kind of what I'd gone back into the chaplain candidacy, obviously, all through seminary, I was a chaplain candidate. So my summers through seminary were learning the Air Force chaplaincy. I'd be assigned to several different bases, 4 or 5 different bases throughout those summers. And then you get positioned into the Air Force Reserve as a chaplain. And so I was a chaplain reservist working out at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs, serving the church in Breckenridge. And they gave me a call. The Air Force Reserve called me up and said, hey, we need you to do what's called a backfill. And so a backfill is when an Air Force chaplain deploys downrange. Downrange is anywhere, Iraq, Afghanistan, any combat zone. And they still have the ministry needs back at the local base. So the active duty guy goes, or active duty chaplain goes downrange. The reservist will come and then backfill and do the ministry that's needed at that base. So they activated me for about a 5-month position at Cannon Air Force Base in Portales, New Mexico. And so I called my elders up and said, hey, they're going to activate me. It was about a 9-hour drive away. So I said, hey, I'm not going to be able to come back. I'm pretty much out of pocket for about 5 months. And the elders like, okay, we knew this was part of the process, of being a chaplain in the reserves as well as a parish pastor. So with prayers, they let me go. And I served through that. But about halfway through that 5-month tour, Air Force Reserve called me up again and said, hey, we're going to need you to do this about every year. And that kind of hit me. It's like, wait a second, I can't be away from my congregation 5 months every year. I mean, imagine 5 months every year, they call on you to go to some base, and Shepherd of the Hills has to, kind of backfill on a weekend basis.
Yeah, the congregation would not feel like they got a good deal.
Exactly. And I felt the same. It's like, I'm not being fair to Christ Lutheran in Breckenridge to them. So the elders and we prayed about it for several months. And they basically said, well, what do you think you want to do? And I said, well, at this point, if they're going to activate me 5 months every year, I might as well just go active duty and be an active duty chaplain. And they said, it probably makes sense. The chairman of our congregation was retired Navy. So he knew the military, he understood the needs. And he said, right now, he said, we would love to have you be our parish pastor. But we think it'd probably be better if you just went active duty Air Force for the sake of both of us. So it was a very, kind of bittersweet parting, because we loved being in Breckenridge. We were skiing, we were hiking in the mountains. The boys loved it. We did not want to leave. But it's obviously it was God's plan, because then our next steps in the chaplaincy have been, so beneficial, so fruitful for us, that it was obviously where God wanted us to be in the chaplaincy. So I finished up and served at Christ Lutheran, and then we were activated full-time to Air Force chaplaincy, and we ended up at Dias Air Force Base in Abilene was our first base.
Okay, so then from there to here.
Yep.
And then what's the trajectory of your career right now? Will you have several more stints as a chaplain? Do you see yourself ending up as a parish pastor eventually? What do you think things are going to look like in future years?
So a lot of prayer, obviously, to figure out what God continues to want for us. But right now, Michelle and I feel that Air Force chaplaincy kind of meets our family needs. It's good ministry for kind of my personality style. And so we hope to stay in the Air Force chaplaincy as long as we can. We'll find out. We actually start doing what they call a bidding process in November of this year. So the way it works now is the bases that need chaplain slots filled will get the roster, and my name will be on the roster, and they'll bid for us, based on our kind of our resume, so to speak, the qualifications that we have, what kind of chaplain they need to service their people. And so they'll start that about November, and we should find out about January where we'll be going. And then we'll be leaving sometime end of May or June next summer to whichever base that is.
Okay.
So, yeah.
To me, there's an irony in the auctioneer being a part of the bidding process.
Exactly.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I'm being bid on this time.
That's right. That's it. Yeah. Okay. So you said it's a good fit for your personality style. Can you say more about that? What's your personality style, and why is it a good fit for chaplaincy?
So I mentioned incarnational ministry.
Yeah.
That term kind of gets thrown around, as Christ really, came in the flesh and he walked with people and he journeyed with them. I feel that the chaplaincy gives me a lot more opportunity to that than the parish did. When I was in the parish, I loved the ministry, but it did seem like I was quite often stuck in the office. I was the only guy. We didn't have any other staff.
Okay.
And so I was making the bulletins and doing a lot of the administrative, creating the website and those. And they're all good things to do, but for me, I wanted to be out with the people.
Sure.
And even in the civilian, I didn't find as much experience. I'm not sure if you had, to be out with people, in their workspaces, in their homes, and just learning and doing what Reverend Harrison talks about, life together, witness, mercy, life together. And so in the chaplaincy, I get tons of that. I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I'm walking with people. Yeah. When I was in the unit back at Dias, I was out on the flatline every day, just walking with airmen, getting to talk with them about their struggles. Or when I was in the office, it was more often counseling, through some serious things rather than just, some of the other things, the administrative things that I was doing as a parish pastor. Yeah. So that's where I feel it's a blessing for my personality, is I just get to walk with people and be hopefully the hands and feet of Christ as they're struggling or just walking through life.
Sure.
So that's how it fits my personality.
What a blessing to have that fit and to be able to recognize that and be in the right place.
Right. Yeah. And then now in the hospital too, same thing. Every day we have 50 or 60 new patients at least come in every day with something, and we get to visit them and just be with them and spend time with them. So I've appreciated that opportunity to just walk with people.
Yeah. So, yeah, great. Now, before we started filming, we were talking about some of the joys and challenges of the chaplaincy. Can you give us a little bit of insight into, what you're doing day to day? I mean, one of the joys obviously is being with people. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the joys and the challenges of being a chaplain right now in your situation?
Okay. So joys are, this program that I'm in, a one-year program, it's a program that it's designed for a lot of self-reflection. They want to make sure that we are doing the best we can to minister and be approachable and really share our faith with folks. And so it's a lot of self-reflection to see how we react with individuals. And so those are some joys. I've learned some things about myself that I didn't realize other people perceived about me. We get a lot of feedback. That becomes a challenge too. I mean, there's some definite times you're like, ooh, I didn't really want to hear that, but I needed to hear that. Type thing.
You have to have a thick skin. Right?
You do. You really, there's some really good criticism that we give to each other in our classes, as well as my supervisor gives to me. And so there's a lot of joy in that, but then there's a lot of challenge, especially because right now the leadership that we have doesn't have maybe the same conservative, traditional, I would even say moral values or guidelines that I think the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod holds. And so when certain things are brought to me about the way I interact with individuals and how I would probably come across with maybe a law and gospel type approach to counseling and interaction with folks, maybe a more liberal understanding of that isn't respected as well.
I see.
And so it's a challenge to continually to rightly divide the word of truth, as we talk about with law and gospel, right. So that we can really, if someone is in a situation because of sin that they've got in their life, we need to call that out and call for repentance, and then proclaim the gospel that Christ has forgiven that and redeems that and brings us out of that. And so for me it's become a good challenge, because when I was in the parish, I was mostly working with members who understood that process of, yes, we're sinners and we need Jesus. Right. And so it just kind of became natural, and it was never out of the ordinary. But now that we're in a setting where it's a little more hostile to Christianity, definitely more hostile to traditional Christianity, there isn't as much want to call out sin for what it is. sin is more just washed away as, well, it's just a problem that can just be done away with, instead of a serious issue that Christ forgives and redeems us out of.
Sure. Yeah. I've shared with you, I had a briefer experience with the same program, clinical pastoral education, a summer program, and I had some similar experiences where I would say I had a much more traditional approach. I remember one big thing for me was, I've always been taught, I've always believed in Jesus' words from John 14 that he's the way, the truth, and the life, the only way to the Father. Right. And I remember my supervisor had a very different perspective on that and sort of believed that all paths led to heaven. Right. Whereas my firm conviction is that Jesus is the way to heaven. So I remember some of those struggles and tensions that were there, and you're having to manage some tension. So what do you do in those situations? Because I'm sure that many people who are watching or listening, they may encounter those same kinds of tensions in their families, in their workplaces, where they're holding on to some particular Christian values and convictions. And in the culture in general, that may not be as accepted. It may be seen as narrow-minded, too traditional, too old-fashioned to believe some of those things. What encouragement would you give to our viewers or listeners about how do you navigate those things as someone who holds on to certain biblical values and principles when the culture can be hostile to those things?
Right. Yeah. Thank you for the question, because I think it's something, especially in the Christian church, we really should be addressing more often. And so what I do is I go back to the Great Commission. When it says go and make disciples of all nations, I look at that term disciple and I see relationship. I see walking with people. I think what's happening, I think our culture has become quite hostile because quite often we have the truth, but when we kind of cast it out there like pearls, it ends up being rejected because we don't have a good relationship with those folks. They don't understand where we're really coming from. They don't know who we are. And so I would encourage folks to continually proclaim the truth, but we don't have to be a jerk about it. We can be pastoral. We can be patient with folks and say, hey, let's learn about each other. Let's find out where we're each coming from, and then we can begin to proclaim truth, because I think it's going to be respected, understood, and received if it's done in relationship rather than just cast out there. I think a lot of our social media, it can be good, but it can also be throwing out truths to people that won't receive it because they don't understand what our background, where we're coming from.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I would encourage folks, really, I use the Acts 1:8 model. And there it says that Jesus sent out everyone and his witnesses to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. I look at those four areas. The Jerusalem for me is my local family. So I'm going to go and make disciples of my local family first. I'm going to spend time with my boys and my wife and those in my immediate family because they know who I am. They know what I stand for, and I can have good discipleship. Then I'm going to reach out a little bit more to that Judea. The country to me represents like the Air Force and the chaplaincy. I can maybe develop some good relationships with other chaplains or with staff or people that I talk to more than one time. And once that relationship develops, then I can have those maybe more challenging conversations. Right. Because then they know I'm not a jerk about it. I'm just saying, hey, this is the truth, and I want to do this to help you. I'm not doing this to take away your freedoms or try to harm you in any way. I really, truly love you, and I want you to have the best. Mm-hmm. God wants us to live in abundance, and I want the best for you. Yeah. And so that's where I see it, is let's do it in relationship rather than just kind of cast it out there.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very practical insight that people can take away and incorporate into their own lives. So thank you for presenting it so clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. One more thing on a professional level, and then I want to turn to personal and family. Okay. And just in case people are not aware, you are a part of the Shepherd of the Hills ministry. Right. During the time that you were here. As a part of your program, mm-hmm. you have a certain number of contact hours with people throughout the week. Right. And so you're using those hours to serve our congregation by visiting some of our members in their homes or even over the phone, talking to them. I know you told me one person that every Monday you have a phone conversation as a part of that ministry. Yeah. And I just marveled at God's grace and provision in the midst of a pandemic, mm-hmm. sending us another pastor to help care for the needs of the flock, and not just another pastor, but someone who, in my opinion, is very skilled mm-hmm. in what he does. So I feel like our church is just very, very blessed to have you and your family here, and I want to say thank you for all that you're doing to serve our congregation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome, and I'm thankful that I have the opportunity. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. we should get enough clinical hours, or what they call it, in the hospital. But due to COVID, they've restricted our presence, rightly, to keep us all safe and to keep the patients safe. And yet I still need the hours. All of us still need the clinical hours. And so I just requested, hey, are there certain visits? Again, with COVID, a lot of folks are stuck at home, or can't get out and fellowship as much. And so I've been very thankful to have that opportunity to visit with members of Shepherd of the Hills, and it's been just as beneficial for me as I hope it is for them and for the ministry here.
Oh, well, it is a definition of a win-win on both sides. It's fantastic. Yeah. So let's turn to the personal, to the family. Can you tell us about your family?
Yeah, so we are blessed. Michelle and I got married in 2000. So it's easy to remember my anniversary, right? Just subtract off from 2000. I know we're coming on 20 years. September 2nd. Yep. So just this Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Definitely. Congratulations.
Yeah. So we're 20 years. We actually have 9 children total. So we have 4 biological, and we have had 5 foster kids. And so we've been foster parents for several years. We haven't been able to do it this year because of COVID and because of only a 1-year assignment. But all of our previous either bases or parishes, we've had foster children.
Wow.
So we've had girls we had 2 twin, or not twin girls, they were a year apart, 1 and 2. They stayed with us for almost 18 months. After that, we had another foster girl who was with us for about 4 months, and then we moved, and we had a little boy with us for over a year, and another little boy after that for a year. And each of those children have been placed back with families, and so thankfully we appreciated kind of making disciples again. And so we had a good opportunity. As hard as it was to let them go, we know they're going back to be with family, and they're in a better position than what they were. We usually ended up being placed with kids who were in pretty rough situations through parents with drug use. So we're thankful to have that opportunity. And then, we've got 4 biologicals. So my oldest, Zeke, just went to college. He is in the pre-seminary route at Concordia, Wisconsin, and he is loving it. We had a Zoom call with him this weekend, and he's in Latin right now, loving it. He's doing all of his Book of Concord confession stuff, and so he's having a blast. So he's doing really well. Don't know which seminary he's going to yet. That's in his hands. I think he's going to end up meeting up with a couple other guys and probably form some good friendships and end up going to the seminary with whichever one. I think both of our seminaries are outstanding.
I agree.
And so I pray that God leads him that way. Our second oldest, Joshua, he's still, my wife homeschools. She actually teaches online for Orange Lutheran High School out of California, and then she homeschools our boys. Okay. And then, so she's working with that for Joshua, and he just got a job here at what's called San Antonio Plastic Blocks, which is basically Legos. But which is something he loves, but he runs camps for kids. And so he's been having a blast, working part-time and still doing school. Noah is our youngest one at home, and he is also doing homeschooling right now, so they've already started their curriculums. And then he plays for the San Antonio Feast, which is a homeschool football program here in town. And he's loving that, because when we were in Abilene, they didn't have a football program for him, just basketball. Yeah. And so he's really excited to come to San Antonio, because he's been just loving playing football, which has been his dream. So, and then our youngest biological has already gone to heaven. So about 2 years ago, on August 4th, our youngest Seth, it was interesting. We were actually at a Christian music festival in Midland, Texas called Rock the Desert. It's one of those kind of weekend concerts for youth where all the big bands come out, Skillet and Toby Mac and all those. And so had a great weekend. And on Sunday of that weekend, Seth started to feel a little sick, and we thought, well, it was hot out. It was, August, very, very hot throughout the weekend. We thought, oh, he's probably just dehydrated. So we brought him home, and that Monday we ended up going into the ER because he was feeling really sick. And he was diagnosed soon after that with what's called a GBM, a glioblastoma multiforme, which is a brain tumor in his head. And so they immediately transferred us to Cook Children's Hospital in Fort Worth, Texas. And we spent the whole ordeal was about 45 days. He went through several brain surgeries. The docs there, we love them. They're very strong Christian doctors who prayed with us before every surgery. We knew that they had Seth's best interests in mind. But yet there came a point when they let us know that what they were doing was not gonna work. The tumor, as much as they could take out, even what was left would continue to grow. And it had what they called fingers that would reach out and continue to kind of envelop his brain. And so they eventually stopped the surgeries. They said it was going to start causing more harm than good. And they sent us back to Abilene. We were still at Dyess Air Force Base at that time, to be with Texas Oncology. And so they started him on chemo and radiation. And one of the side effects, as many know with cancer, of radiation is seizures. And so about the next 2 weeks, Seth had several seizures, which were kind of starting to debilitate. They're really affecting his overall well-being. And after about 2 weeks, he had a very serious seizure that we believe ended up taking his life. We life flighted him after that seizure back to Cook Children's, and the docs kind of did their analysis and looked at him and said, we don't think anything's going to work. There's no longer brain activity. And so they had intubated him to life flight him, but they said, we think it would be best if you removed intubation and removed life support. And we prayed for hours and prayed over Seth, and we basically let him go to heaven. And so Seth was a runner. He ran with me all the time because we run a lot in the military. And so we have just said that Seth has just run ahead of us to heaven, and he was the first one there. So on September 19th of 2018, coming up on 2 years, he departed and he died, and he's now with Jesus. And so part of this program I'm in now is because of that. As an Air Force chaplain, we are called to do a lot of very serious type things. And so they want to make sure that I'm a good, healthy chaplain. And so they gave me this opportunity to be in this program. And what I've learned about myself is that, even more through this trial and through this suffering of losing our son, has God been present. And he's been in the midst, and he's been the one walking with us and carrying us through. I believe now, and for Michelle and I, that our faith is stronger than it has ever been. That God is with us, especially when we're struggling. And it's every day has been sometimes trying to just take one step in front of the other, feeling that pain of losing someone you love, especially a child. But knowing that step is done because God has walked with us through that, and he carries us through those struggles. And so as much as I don't want to go through what we've been through, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because God, even more, I feel his presence with us through his word and sacraments. One of our favorite kind of stories is we had a very, very supportive Lutheran church back in Abilene, Zion Lutheran, Pastor Clyde Kieshnick. We love Pastor K. And Seth was going to be going into confirmation the year that he died. So he had gotten all the books, and he was excited and ready to study scriptures. He loved reading the Bible. And so he had started reading some prep stuff when he was diagnosed. And so because of the brain tumor, he wasn't able to focus. So we would still bring him to church. And we had a Wednesday night midweek service is when we would do kind of like a short devotion, communion, and then they would break up into adult Bible studies and confirmation. So Seth was with us, and we had communion that night, and we all walked up, and Seth was the only one that wasn't confirmed yet. And for some reason, Pastor K gave communion to Seth the Wednesday before his final parting.
Really?
And we talked to Pastor K about it after, and we laughed. We're like, he's not confirmed yet. And Pastor K he froze for a second, and then he's like, that's right, he's not, but I just felt like communing him. And we have been thankful for that ever since, that maybe doctrinally we wouldn't, hold to that. We, at least for us, most of the times, your first communion is after confirmation. I don't know what exactly Shepherd of the Hills does here, but that's what Zion did, was you would receive first communion after confirmation. So him receiving that communion, and the way their altar was designed was the semi circle.
Oh yeah.
Every time we commune now, we just think Seth is there with us around the throne of Christ, communing with us every time we receive the true body and blood of Christ.
Wow.
Seth is there at Christ's side. And so as much as we'd love to have him here physically, we know Seth is with us every time we receive word and sacrament, because God is there with us.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know that, that's not a pain that ever goes away. And to be able to, I don't know how I would talk about that if I were in your shoes, but to be able to share your faith and some specifics of your story. Thank you for doing that for the sake of our audience. I mean, there are people who are listening who have suffered some significant losses in their lives, and how do you process that? How do you put one foot in front of the other and each day? Thank you for sharing what you shared, because it gives people an example of one family who by faith is dealing with the struggle of loss, and doing so in a way that you said your faith has even grown through all of it.
Yeah.
And so I hope and pray that people will be able to take something from that.
I hope so too.
To help them through their own struggles. So thank you again for sharing all that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and it gives me a different perspective on you and your family, just to see the way that you guys carry yourselves, having been through all that you've been through. For some people, they may not respond the same way. For some people, it may crush their faith, and they may say, "Why is this happening, God?" And it may take them a completely different direction. For you guys, your faith has grown stronger.
Yeah, but we've had those days too. We've had those days of, why God, why us? We've always been known as what we call ourselves the family on mission. We are a family who shares God's word and tries to be his hands and feet wherever we go. So we thought, did we do something wrong? I've had those questions. Why did Seth have to face this? Why? Because those 45 days were a lot of pain and misery for him. Being in and out of surgery, nausea, just all the different things that go along with medications that are required for cancer treatment. So we've had those questions and we've had those lows, but I just want to share that, God is still there. It's not that God has walked away. I loved what I think either you or Pastor Doug shared in the message. It was part of the announcements of, if you feel like God is far away, who has really turned? It's usually us that turn away. God is always right there with us. Yeah. And so I hope that our family can share that encouragement that yes, there are days when you're going to struggle and you're going to feel like there's just no tomorrow. But I pray that, someone will come alongside and let you know that God's right there with you and he's walking that road with you and he suffered with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for being so real about all that. My heart goes out to you and Michelle, and Zeke and Joshua and Noah as a family. And I'm so glad that our church gets to be a part of your healing and your personal experience with the Lord. It's a joy to be able to be with you guys in worship. And now, whenever we're taking communion, I have another thought as a part of that. So, it's great. Well, I had a couple other questions I want to ask before we close out our time together. Okay. One is, how can our congregation pray for you, for your family, for your ministry?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity, because we need prayer. It's a part of our daily family tradition and liturgy. And so we would ask that if the congregation could, just to continue to pray for, I'd say, traditional conservative chaplains in the military. We continue to fight that kind of uphill battle when a society and culture doesn't want to maybe hear the truth. I pray that we can continually share the truth as good conservative chaplains. And again, not be a jerk about it. Be loving, be pastoral. And that's what I hope that I can be and learn through this process. So I ask for prayer for this program, that we can continue to preach true law and gospel in the midst of people who are hurting and need that. Yeah. So, and then for our family, we just, we're up for another move already. That does bring a lot of kind of, we've gotten used to it somewhat, but you're never used to always being pulled away from friends. And I think I shared with you already, I was like, as soon as I felt the warmness and welcoming of the love in this congregation, I already don't want to say goodbye, but I know next summer we're going to have to. And so you kind of think, is there any way we could stay, and be, but we know that is calling us to where we need to be. So just pray for those transitions for us.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Finally, what do you do for fun?
What do we do for fun? Okay, we are outdoor people.
Yeah.
We love anything outdoors. And so we are hikers. When we were in Colorado, we hiked 5 different 14ers. Those are mountains that are 14,000 feet above sea level or higher.
Oh, wow.
And so the whole family's hiked. We are skiers. We are bikers. Well, we've done several miles of the trails here. We love San Antonio bike trails. And so we'll be out doing that. We do a lot of bow hunting and archery and that kind of stuff. So pretty much anything family and anything outdoors is kind of what we do.
Family and outdoors.
Family outdoors.
Got it. Got it. Well, Pastor Chad, thank you so much for joining me for the podcast today. I know for those who are watching and listening, it's going to be a great benefit to them. So thank you for taking your time. Thank you for opening up about your life. And once again, we're just so pleased to have you and your family here at Shepherd of the Hills.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. And thank you all so much for watching. Please tune in next time. It's a joy to be able to bring these podcasts to you. Take care of yourself. Stay healthy. The Lord's blessings to you today.